Assalamu alaikum. And welcome back to our channel, Pakistan Zindabad, the next world superpower. This is episode 37, and for this deep dive, we're focusing on one specific, really powerful book, Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan, written by Mr. Zaheer Ahmad Meer.
It's a pleasure to be here. And this is, I think, a crucial topic for anyone interested in the future of nations with, these large dynamic populations.
Absolutely, because the author, he cuts straight to the central challenge, the question that so many countries are facing.
Right. How do you turn potential into performance?
Exactly. And this book, it's not just a historical reflection, is it? It's framed as a comprehensive national roadmap.
It is. It specifically addresses what the author calls the single most potent yet, and this is the key phrase, currently underutilized asset a country can possess.
It's youth demographic.
It's youth, and that immediately sets the stage for our core mission here today.
It does. We're looking at a nation with an incredible demographic advantage. I mean, a youth bulge that, statistically speaking, should be fueling just exponential growth and stability.
Should be, yes. But the book's thesis, which it states right at the beginning, is decisive. It's almost a warning.
No nation can rise without preparing its youth to lead it.
And it doesn't stop there. The author suggests this power has been, and I'm quoting here, underutilized, misdirected, and often deliberately suppressed.
So that's really the analytical core of our conversation today, isn't it? We have to understand why.
Yes, why is this incredible demographic power currently dormant? Or, as the book suggests, actively being transformed into a liability.
And then, crucially, how does the author propose reversing this trend?
Exactly. We're going to be dissecting a framework that grounds national destiny not in geography, not in resources, but in character, discipline, and principled leadership drawn directly from the founder's original mandate.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away. We need to bridge that gap, the gap between this enormous demographic potential on one side
and the often disappointing institutional performance we see on the other.
Right. And the solution, according to the source material, it's not just about vocational training or simple employment schemes.
No, it's much deeper than that. It is fundamentally about preparing young people for the mantle of leadership. It's about ensuring they are equipped with character and discipline before they acquire the levers of power.
Character before power. That seems to be the guiding principle.
It is. Let's start with the original vision. To understand the solution, we have to first understand the original intention.
The founder's mandate.
Yes. The book makes a really crucial distinction about how Quaid-e-Azam viewed the younger generation during the founding of the nation.
Which was?
He didn't see them as a mere crowd. That's a key word the author uses. He didn't just see them as an activist space to be mobilized for rallies or some kind of, political spectacle.
Which is how they're often treated now.
Very often. Instead, he viewed them explicitly and institutionally as future leadership.
That shift in perception is, well, it's absolute defining, isn't it? It changes everything.
It changes the entire calculus. If a leader views youth as a crowd, they are treated as a temporary resource. They're a source of energy for a short campaign, and then they're discarded.
But if you view them as future leadership,
then your entire national investment strategy changes. You're not just mobilizing them for temporary political goals, you're training them for institutional endurance, for long-term governance.
So when the foundational view is that the youth are your successors, your investment focuses on things that last.
Things that last. Character development, ethical training, giving them practical administrative insight into how institutions actually work. You prepare them to inherit the state, rather than just using them as shock troops for political battles that last a single season.
And the book argues that the modern state has completely inverted this focus.
Completely. It treats them as disposable political energy. And this commitment from the founder, it wasn't vague. He established 4 very specific roles they were meant to inherit.
The pillars of inheritance, as the book calls them.
Yes, and he links them directly to the ultimate stability of the state. First, they were meant to be the builders of institutions.
Okay, builders of institutions.
Yeah.
That implies so much more than just staffing existing offices.
Far more. It requires administrative skill, long-term vision, the ethical clarity to design and maintain structures that function ethically and, outlive the individuals who create them.
So it means your educational system has to be producing administrators, jurists, technocrats.
Not just political cheerleaders, exactly. The second mandate was to be protectors of constitutional values.
That one is fascinating because it implies an active role, an intellectual defense.
It does. It means a citizen isn't just someone who obeys the law, but someone who understands the spirit and the letter of the Constitution and actively defends its supremacy against, say, transient political opportunism or rapid ideological shifts.
It demands constitutional literacy, a real deep respect for the rule of law.
And if the youth are not trained to understand those values, they can't protect them when they come under threat, whether from internal forces or external pressures. It's a core competency.
In the third pill.
Drivers of progress. This speaks directly to innovation and economic acceleration. This is where that youth energy translates directly into GDP growth.
So the willingness to embrace technology, to challenge inefficient processes, create new economic avenues.
All of that. And the final point, the fourth pillar, is maybe the ultimate test of character. They were to be guardians of national integrity.
That requires profound selflessness, a commitment to a unified national purpose that has to transcend regional, ethnic, or sectarian divides.
It demands an ethical framework where the good of the whole outweighs personal or group gain. And this is all encapsulated perfectly in the core, quote, the book highlights. It's one that should, frankly, be posted in every government office.
Let's hear it.
Train the youth with discipline and character, and the state will stand unshaken.
Notice the sequence there.
The sequence is everything. Character is the foundation. Discipline is the structure. And the stability of the state is the inevitable outcome.
It's conditional. The stability rests entirely on the quality of that training.
Entirely. It suggests that if the foundation of character is missing, no amount of geopolitical advantage or inherited wealth can prevent the structure of the state from collapsing under political or economic stress.
It almost makes national security a function of moral training.
That's a great way to put it. Now let's look at the specific inheritances they were meant to receive, beyond just these roles. The book lists 4 crucial interlocking elements: responsibility, authority, accountability, and national purpose.
And this brings us to a key analytical point you mentioned earlier, the fundamental difference between being given authority and being given responsibility.
Yes, this is a distinction that many modern political systems seem to have forgotten.
Tell me more about that. I mean, we often use them interchangeably. Authority seems like the more tangible goal for most people.
It does, but authority is simply the legal power to command action. It's procedural. It can be delegated, it can be seized, it can even be bought.
Whereas responsibility?
Responsibility is the ethical and moral obligation to perform, to adhere to the highest standards, and crucially, to be held accountable for outcomes, both positive and negative.
So Jinnah was mandating that youth inherit responsibility first.
Yes. They needed to internalize the weight of national purpose and the expectation of accountability before acquiring the official authority to command others.
That makes profound sense. If a political system just hands out authority, a cabinet position, a civil service role, without first embedding that reciprocal sense of moral responsibility,
you get corruption, you get institutional cronyism, you get the chronic misuse of public power.
You produce leaders who feel entitled but are entirely exempt from accountability.
Precisely. And the system, as the author argues, later inverted this entire process. Youth were often given minimal authority, stripped of any serious policy responsibility, completely shielded from meaningful accountability, and handed a vague, shifting national purpose, if any at all.
Which leads to deep ideological confusion and cynicism.
And that systemic failure to nurture leadership leads us directly into the core diagnosis the book presents, the reason for the current situation.
Right, and this next section of the book is so important because it completely shifts the locus of the problem, doesn't it?
It does. The central argument is that the failure of potential lies not in some inherent weakness of the younger generation, not their lack of ambition or their supposed laziness or this so-called apathy we hear about.
The failure is in the system they were supposed to inherit.
Entirely in the system. And for anyone who studies governance and development, this is a profoundly important point. It refutes the easy narrative that blames the victims.
Right. It's easy to point fingers at a generation.
Much easier. But when smart, ambitious, and educated individuals, the demographic dividend itself, fail to integrate or thrive, the book argues, and I think forcefully, that it's a failure of the infrastructure they are trying to enter, not a failure of their ambition.
They have been institutionally blocked.
Yes. So if the youth were prepared, but the system was incapable of absorbing them, we have to look at the specific mechanisms that failed.
Okay, let's dedicate some serious time to this. The book meticulously outlines 5 specific systemic failures. The first one is a structural rigidity we see in so many maturing political systems. Leadership monopoly.
Leadership monopoly. The author argues that youth were actively and systematically excluded from formal decision-making structures, and this led to a stifling lack of institutional renewal.
This isn't just about having old people in charge, is it? It's more structural than that.
It's about a deliberate, structural refusal to implement succession planning. Imagine a massive corporation that refuses to hire anyone under the age of, say, 50 for senior executive positions, and on top of that, provides no structured mechanism for younger, proven talent to even enter the policy boardrooms.
What happens over time?
Over decades, the leadership layer becomes rigid. It becomes resistant to technological and social change. It becomes incapable of understanding the economic and cultural dynamics faced by younger demographics.
So the consequence of that monopoly is that the system effectively chokes off the vital flow of fresh ideas.
Exactly. Institutional renewal grinds to a halt. The book makes a great point here. Youth were sometimes allowed into the political theater, the rallies, the street movements, the token advisory roles.
But they were consistently barred from the boardroom.
The boardroom, the policymaking tables, the top tiers of the civil service, the regulatory bodies. And that institutional stagnation meant that procedures, technologies, and governance models remained stuck in the past, entirely unequipped to manage a 21st century economy or population.
Which leads us to the second failure, which addresses the preparation pipeline itself. Educational disconnect.
Yes. The education system produced degrees that failed to translate directly into market skills or economic opportunity. And this created a massive, demoralizing mismatch between ambition and reality.
The book calls the output of this system credentialism, not competence.
We have to be really precise about what that means. Credentialism means the system focused on creating paper qualifications degrees, diplomas, that acted merely as screening mechanisms for jobs, rather than proof of actual functional knowledge or applied skill.
So students chase grades, they chase certifications, but those pieces of paper fail to certify that they're actually job ready.
Exactly. The degree certifies attendance and maybe rote memorization, but not the ability to innovate or problem solve or administer complex systems. The system became focused on process over product.
And this failure is a catastrophic, self-inflicted economic wound, isn't it?
Absolutely. When millions of graduates are deemed unemployable, despite holding advanced degrees, the trust in the entire social contract erodes.
And the potential for that youth bulge to become a productivity engine, the whole demographic dividend idea, is just completely neutralized.
It's neutralized because their theoretical training is disconnected from the practical, technological, and administrative needs of the modern world. The state wastes immense time and money educating individuals only to find those same individuals cannot contribute meaningfully.
Okay, moving to failure number 3, which is about political manipulation, political exploitation.
This is a tough one. The book argues that young people were mobilized solely for political slogans and rallies, but were never genuinely empowered for actual governance or meaningful policy input.
They were treated as a utility.
A tool.
A tool, but never a partner in nation building. They were used for their energy and their numbers to create momentum during campaigns, but their utility just evaporated the day after the election.
And that kind of exploitation is incredibly damaging because it creates a profoundly cynical political class among the youth.
It does. They learn that the system only values their muscle, not their brains or their ethical input. The system essentially ensured they remained perpetually activist, but it actively discouraged them from becoming statesman-like.
That's a perfect summary. They were taught how to protest, but not how to draft a budget.
And that prevents them from developing the complex skills required for, policy negotiation, legislative compromise, bureaucratic administration.
All of the boring but essential work of governance. When youth are only brought in to shout slogans, they naturally internalize the idea that power is about spectacle and fervor, not about institutional process and quiet competence.
That cynicism, of course, feeds directly into the fourth and maybe the most emotionally devastating failure: economic marginalization.
This is where it gets really serious. High rates of unemployment and underemployment acted as a massive dampener, effectively crushing ambition, self-worth, and morale across the younger generation.
The book calls this the critical transformation point, where a national asset begins to morph into a liability.
It is. A person with high potential, with educational qualifications, but with no commensurate opportunity. That is a recipe for social and political instability.
Unemployment is so much more than just an economic statistic.
It's a psychological and moral crisis. When you systematically deny a generation the chance to contribute productively to the economy, you deny them the confidence, the stability, and the self-worth they need to step up to leadership.
And they see the pathway to success is blocked by nepotism or patronage or just structural inefficiency.
Which leads directly to frustration, migration, or tragically, the search for non-institutional, often destructive avenues of power.
And finally, the fifth failure addresses the intellectual environment, loss of direction.
The absence of a unifying, coherent national mission left youth confused about their role and their purpose in nation building. It replaced a shared purpose with fragmented individual concern.
The national narrative became fragmented.
Exactly. It was dominated by narrow personality politics or regional disputes or just short-sighted economic survival, rather than a broad, inspiring, and consistent vision for the future.
The kind of vision that actually unites a massive, diverse, and young population.
Without a clear North Star, something like achieving universal constitutional supremacy by 2035 or becoming a global technological hub by 2045, every individual is just left to fend for themselves. And that quickly erodes the collective purpose and the ethical framework that Jinnah intended them to inherit.
Hearing that list, it feels like the system was almost actively designed to thwart success. It's a masterclass in how to waste human capital.
It is. And it delivers the book's stark, powerful conclusion. A frustrated youth becomes a national liability. A trained youth becomes a national asset.
The real-world implication of that transformation is immense, isn't it?
It's everything. A national asset creates wealth, fuels innovation, ensures stability and continuity. A national liability, on the other hand, drains resources, increases social conflict, and seeks alternative, often violent or socially disruptive, outlets for their energy and frustration.
So the book's argument is that the failure of the system to actively train, trust, and integrate its youth is arguably the single greatest factor suppressing the nation's ability to maximize its demographic dividend.
And to secure its future, the stakes are that high.
Which brings us to the scale of the issue. Let's talk about the numbers, because the size of this demographic advantage is what makes the failure so tragic and the opportunity so potent.
The book keeps coming back to this maxim. Demographics decide destiny. We are not talking about a small, influential cohort here. We are talking about a massive youth majority.
And the sheer size of that generation means that any policy interventions aren't linear. They're potentially exponential.
That's a great point. If you introduce a positive change, say, in education or economic transparency, it affects millions of people instantly. It yields generational returns.
But conversely, every systemic failure we just discussed has a catastrophic consequence that is amplified by the sheer volume of frustrated people.
Exactly. If this group is mobilized, skilled, and integrated, they don't just move the needle. They fundamentally redefine the entire trajectory of the nation.
The author points to 5 specific areas where a trained youth population could accelerate national development. Let's walk through them.
The first is innovation potential. This is the raw energy of new ideas, the willingness to take technological risks, and the ability to adopt and scale new technologies far faster than an older, more established workforce.
And this applies across the board, right? Not just in tech.
Everywhere, from agricultural technology and water management to high-tech software and financial systems. Innovation is inherently impatient, as you know. It's driven by those who look at an old system and say, there must be a better way.
And if you have millions of young people trained in critical thinking and entrepreneurship,
you unleash a torrent of new businesses, patents, scientific breakthroughs. This is the engine of a modern knowledge economy. It moves the country away from a reliance on low-value manufacturing or commodity exports toward high-value intellectual services.
Okay, second, and this is where the economics get a bit technical, is economic acceleration.
Right. Simply put, a skilled, employed youth bulge boosts production and consumption simultaneously. This is the realization of the famed demographic dividend.
Let's break that down for our listeners. What is the demographic dividend in practical terms?
It's a critical technical point. The dividend occurs when the proportion of the working-age population, which is usually young relative to the dependent, non-working population children and the elderly, peaks. You're talking about a massive shift in the dependency ratio.
So instead of a small working population burdened by supporting a large dependent group,
you have a huge working age cohort contributing to the tax base, increasing national savings, investing in infrastructure, and driving consumption.
But this window of opportunity is temporary.
Very temporary, maybe 30 to 40 years. And if it's missed, the population ages, the window closes, and that dividend turns into a sustained economic drain.
So the benefit is not just more workers, it's a structural shift in the nation's entire balance sheet.
Precisely. The third area the book highlights is institutional renewal. This directly addresses that leadership monopoly we talked about.
New perspectives, coupled with the Quaid's principles of character, revitalizing stagnant institutions.
Stagnant institutions are essentially defined by inertia, right? Doing things the way they've always been done, regardless of efficacy.
So injecting disciplined, ethically trained young professionals into the civil services, into regulatory bodies.
It fundamentally brings in technological literacy. It brings in a resistance to entrenched corruption and a commitment to modern standards of efficiency. It prevents the slow, bureaucratic decay of the state apparatus by constantly challenging outdated procedures.
Like installing a new operating system on an old computer.
That's the perfect analogy. It changes the speed of execution fundamentally. Fourth is political modernization.
This suggests a necessary shift away from traditional, personality-driven, often feudal or dynastic politics.
Towards policy-based discourse and merit. Modernization happens when the electorate starts demanding substance over spectacle. A youth population that is constitutionally literate, economically integrated, and focused on solutions will inevitably demand policy transparency and accountability from their leaders.
Forcing the system to evolve beyond these old control mechanisms that rely on illiteracy and dependence.
Right. And fifth, social transformation. This implies large-scale societal shifts driven by the values and perspectives of the younger generation.
Often towards greater inclusion, tolerance, progressive outlooks on health, education.
Women's empowerment, yes. It's about accelerating cultural change from the bottom up. When young leaders are given platforms, they naturally champion inclusive values and challenge deeply entrenched societal biases.
But the contrast here is terrifying. The book warns that all this potential inevitably turns into a massive, destabilizing demographic risk if the youth are not. And there's a list here. Trained, trusted, integrated, guided, and disciplined.
That risk is the potential for an explosion. We've described immense energy and dynamism. Now imagine that energy is channeled into frustration, political extremism, or social instability because the institutional doors remain closed.
Because merit is ignored and economic pathways are blocked.
The sheer volume of frustrated, educated, and unemployed youth can overload the social and political safety nets. It can lead to internal conflict, mass migration, and ultimately, national disintegration.
So to secure the nation, you have to manage this resource effectively.
To ignore it is to invite chaos. It's that simple.
This brings us back to the foundational solution the book insists on: character. The author argues that attempting to grant power before instilling character is like giving a destructive force a larger hammer.
Exactly. And this next section provides the moral compass. It defines the essential qualities needed for ethical, constitutional leadership. It roots youth power not in entitlement, but in responsibility.
By outlining Jinnah's 5 principles for character?
The structural genius of this model is that it insists on internal discipline before external authority. It systematically flips the standard political incentive structure on its head.
How so?
Well, it's a framework designed to produce administrators and statesmen who serve the system, rather than demagogues who use the system for personal gain.
Okay, let's dissect these principles one by one, starting with the absolute foundation: character before power.
This is non-negotiable, particularly in a society that might have a patronage-based culture. Ethical governance requires moral integrity as a prerequisite for assuming any office.
Whether that's a local municipal position or a seat in parliament.
Any office. Power without character is inherently self-serving. It's used for personal gain, for the enrichment of family and allies, and that leads directly to the chronic institutional decay and systemic corruption that the entire society pays for.
So by demanding character first, the model establishes a high bar for entry into public life.
A very high bar. One based solely on merit and integrity, not inherited wealth, family name, or political connection.
The second principle follows logically from that: discipline before ambition.
Right. This focuses on self-control, respect for process, and adherence to institutional rules over sheer, unchecked desire for status or influence.
Ambition is a necessary engine for progress, though.
Of course. But unchecked ambition is dangerous. It leads to corner-cutting, bypassing constitutional rules, undermining democratic processes for short-term gain.
So discipline, in this context, means respect for procedure.
Respect for procedure, adherence to the chain of command, and the maturity to work patiently within established constitutional and institutional limits. It ensures that the leader views their role as serving the institution rather than bending the institution to serve their personal career path.
The third is perhaps the most revolutionary cultural shift the book proposes: service before status.
This one is huge. It prioritizes public contribution and output over personal gain or hierarchical entitlement.
This directly challenges the cultural pathology of what's often called VIP culture, doesn't it?
It does. A culture where leadership is intrinsically linked with status symbols, luxury, entitlement, and exemption from the very rules they impose on the governed.
True leadership, as defined here, is defined by its output.
By what you contribute to the nation, the sacrifice you make, not by the perks, privileges, and exemptions you enjoy. This principle is absolutely vital for restoring trust between the governed and the governing.
Because when the youth see leaders prioritizing genuine public service, they're inspired to follow that ethical model.
And when they see status and entitlement, they are inspired to emulate the corruption. It's a clear choice.
Principle number 4 insists on competence. Knowledge before authority.
The war cry of true meritocracy. This challenges the entrenched practice of political patronage. Authority should flow naturally and demonstrably from competence and proven expertise.
Not from loyalty or familial connection.
Absolutely not. We've all seen systems where individuals are appointed to critical roles in finance, energy, education based purely on their political alignment, not on their functional knowledge of the field. This principle insists that true, effective leadership is founded on rigorous education, functional skill, and a comprehensive demonstrated understanding of the policy area.
If you don't know the numbers, you don't get the job.
Simple as that. And finally, a principle essential for institutional stability: law before emotion.
Upholding constitutional supremacy and institutional rules over transient populist sentiment.
In any democracy, especially one with rapid information flows, emotional appeals and populist anger can easily overwhelm rational long-term governance.
So this commitment to law before emotion anchors the leader.
It anchors them to the Constitution and the legal framework. It ensures decisions are based on objective rules and established legal principles, providing long-term stability and predictability.
Even when those decisions are politically difficult or unpopular in the short term.
Especially then. It's the institutional check against mob rule and the destructive force of transient political waves.
The book issues a stark warning derived from these principles. Leadership without character destroys nations.
It does, and it clearly defines what youth leadership must be: ethical, constitutional, and institutional.
And it sets this in sharp contrast to populist leadership.
Exactly. Populist leadership thrives on the very things this model seeks to constrain: emotion, charisma, the promise of short-term, instant gratification.
Often achieved by bypassing constitutional institutions and undermining the law.
While the Quaid-e-Azam model demands the exact opposite: an ethical foundation that respects constitutional process and builds institutions patiently. The goal is to create administrators and systems architects who build systems that last.
Rather than political personalities who only last a single volatile political cycle.
That is the difference between genuine nation-building and corrosive self-aggrandizement.
Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. After diagnosing the problem and establishing the ethical foundation, the book provides a practical 5-step roadmap for institutional change. This is the implementation phase.
Yes, we shift entirely now from why to how. These 5 steps are designed to be a comprehensive, systematic overhaul of the state's relationship with its youth.
The goal is to dismantle those systemic failures we discussed earlier: the monopolies, the exploitation, the disconnect.
And rebuild the necessary infrastructure for a meritocracy to actually thrive.
Let's start with step 1, educational alignment with leadership.
This step tackles that educational disconnect head-on. The mandate for classrooms must shift its goal from merely producing degree holders
To producing constitutional citizens, thinkers, problem solvers, innovators, and administrators.
This requires transforming the entire philosophical goal of the educational system. If the current goal is credentialism, the new goal must be functional output, civic literacy, and national contribution.
So constitutional citizens understand their rights and their responsibility.
Deeply. And problem solvers and innovators are the engines of economic development. They're capable of generating solutions rather than just reciting old facts. Administrators are the backbone of good governance.
So leadership training isn't some extracurricular activity, it has to be institutionalized.
Precisely. The book insists that leadership training, grounded in character and discipline, must begin in classrooms. It has to be formally integrated into the curriculum.
Not just left to external political rallies or vague societal influences.
No. It has to be formalized, assessed, and treated as equally important as mathematics or history. Starting the training young ensures that the required character and discipline are baked into the individual before they even seek a leadership position.
It turns education into a structured pipeline for national purpose.
That's the idea. Step 2 then links skills directly to the moral authority and confidence required for leadership.
The core premise here is that economic inclusion is the engine that builds leadership confidence.
It is. A young person who can stand on their own economic feet is a confident and credible leader. Confidence is deeply tied to the ability to contribute.
If a generation feels economically useless or reliant on patronage, they can't step up with a necessary moral authority.
They can't. So the book outlines specific, necessary infrastructure to counter that economic marginalization we talked about.
Things like national skill academies, entrepreneurship programs, technology training.
Industrial apprenticeships, and structured youth employment pipelines. And these are not vague ideas. They are precise, measurable mechanisms for bridging that educational disconnect.
Let's get specific. What would a national skill academy focus on?
It would have to provide rapid, market-aligned training, focusing on sectors like digital services, specialized engineering, high-value agriculture, things the economy needs right now.
And entrepreneurship programs move youth away from being perpetual job seekers.
They become job creators. Industrial apprenticeships bridge the gap between theory and application. But crucially, the structured youth employment pipelines must be transparent and merit-based.
To show the youth that discipline and skill lead directly to visible opportunity.
It breaks the cycle of nepotism and despair. It proves the system works.
Okay, step 3. Institutional entry points for youth. This directly confronts the leadership monopoly failure.
And the book uses a powerful quote here, a warning to entrenched leadership. When institutions close doors to youth, the streets open them.
And what are the long-term consequences of that? The street is chaos.
Institutions are structure and legitimacy. When you systematically bar capable, energetic young people from legitimate avenues of contribution, they will inevitably seek illegitimate or chaotic ones.
This is where frustration turns into radicalization or mass social instability.
Or outright rebellion. The functional safety valve of any successful society is its ability to absorb its youth into its core structures. If you can't integrate them, you will have to contain them.
And containing them is far more costly.
Infinitely more. Therefore, the book demands formal induction into the core engines of the modern state.
And it lists them specifically. Civil services, local governments, policy think tanks, regulatory bodies, and public sector innovation units.
These are mandated entry points, not just suggestions. Civil services need renewal to increase technological proficiency. Local governments are the essential training grounds for political accountability and grassroots administration.
It teaches responsibility early.
Exactly. Policy think tanks and regulatory bodies need the infusion of knowledge and ethical expertise that challenges established corruption. And creating public sector innovation units ensures that modernization is mandated and institutionalized.
This would require things like mandated quotas and accelerated merit-based entry for qualified young professionals.
It has to be forced. It won't happen organically against entrenched interests.
Right. Step 4, political reform. Youth as decision makers, not tools.
This addresses the political exploitation failure. And the goal here is ambitious: to transform politics into a school of leadership.
Moving it away from being characterized as a factory of chaos.
The current political model often rewards opportunism, spectacle, and patronage, which violates every principle we've discussed. To enforce this change, the book demands 4 necessary political reforms.
What are
First, youth quotas in legislatures, ensuring mandated representation beyond just tokenism. Second, internal party democracy, forcing political parties to practice meritocracy in their own structures.
That one seems particularly vital. If the parties themselves are dynastic or autocratic, they can't produce ethical leaders.
They can't. The party structure is the primary national filter for leadership. If that filter is corrupted, the entire political ecosystem suffers.
What are the other 2 reforms?
Third is leadership merit criteria, making character and competence demonstrable prerequisites for running for public office. And fourth, a focus on policy-based politics, shifting the national discourse away from personality attacks to substantive issues like energy, water, and fiscal policy.
A school of leadership versus a factory of chaos.
It's about mentorship, discipline, and substantive debate versus producing volatile, untrained, cynical actors who prioritize self-interest.
And the final step, step 5, addresses the loss of direction. National mission for youth.
Right. The book insists on the necessity of a clear, unifying national mission to eliminate ideological confusion and pervasive frustration. This is about establishing purpose over propaganda.
Explain that distinction.
Propaganda is manipulative, vague, and fleeting. Purpose is unifying, enduring, and constructive. A clear national mission provides every young person with a tangible, measurable goal they can contribute to.
It creates collective momentum, a shared identity that transcends local differences.
It does, and the book proposes 5 mission pillars, which are deeply interwoven with the goal of self-reliance and institutional strength.
Let's list those pillars again.
Economic self-reliance, institutional revival, technological advancement, constitutional supremacy, and national unity.
These pillars define the future state by directly combating the present failures, don't they?
They do. Economic self-reliance removes external dependencies. Institutional revival repairs the administrative apparatus. Technological advancement makes the youth bulge competitive globally. Constitutional supremacy entrenches the rule of law, and national unity is the binding agent.
These 5 missions give youth a clear, constructive, and unifying focus for the next several decades.
It gives them a reason to build, not just to protest.
So if this 5-step reconstruction framework is methodically implemented, what is the envisioned future state? The book paints a pretty clear picture.
It's a nation where meritocracy defines the national culture. It's a vision that aligns perfectly with the Quaid's original principles of character and discipline.
A nation where youth lead the charge on innovation and policy design.
Where young professionals actively reform the very institutions that govern them. Where educated, disciplined minds are finally recognized as the primary source of national power.
Replacing the dominance of inherited wealth, inherited status, or political patronage.
In this future, leadership is earned through demonstrable character, competence, and service. It's not inherited or seized. And ultimately, merit becomes the national culture. It becomes the default setting for success and contribution.
And that's the critical transition, isn't it? From a system based on privilege and entitlement to one based entirely on performance in public service.
When merit is the culture, the youth are incentivized to pursue character, discipline, and knowledge because they see a clear, functional, and legitimate pathway to reward and national contribution. It closes that confidence gap we talked about.
The author provides a powerful reciprocal statement that really summarizes this whole deep dive. When youth rise with discipline and vision, the nation rises with them.
It's not a zero-sum game. The success of the generation is the inevitable success of the state. Their destinies are inextricably linked.
The book concludes that the time for treating the youth as a political problem to be contained or a disposable tool to be exploited is over.
It has to be. They must be viewed and treated as the indispensable custodians and architects of the future state, and they have to be equipped with the ethical, constitutional, and institutional discipline to fulfill that role.
That is the essential takeaway from this deep dive into Quaid-e-Azam of Pakistan. The nation's single greatest resource is not its land, not its minerals, not its geographical location, it is its youth.
This generation holds the key to accelerating all aspects of national development, but only if the system is decisively reconstructed to embrace them through merit and character.
The author's analysis is a demand for immediate structural action. His final command really resonates with that need for an ethical and structural overhaul.
Empower the youth with knowledge, discipline, and responsibility, and Pakistan will reclaim its destiny. This isn't just a call for better schooling, it's a demand for governance mechanisms that actually reward character and institutional contribution.
It provides a comprehensive, principle-driven solution for turning a massive demographic challenge into a profound national advantage. It forces institutions to modernize, to implement merit, and to open their doors.
Or risk being entirely overwhelmed by the energy they have historically refused to harness.
And this leaves us with a provocative thought for you to ponder, building on this critical framework of character and institutional reform.
If the book insists that character is the necessary precursor to power, what specific measurable institutional reforms beyond the educational system, which is step one, must a nation implement first to demonstrably prove to its youth that discipline and service truly lead to tangible, visible reward?
Think about that gap between aspiration and current institutional reality. Is the absolute first step transparent accountability for current leaders, showing that character violations have immediate consequences? Or is it mandatory merit quotas and local government hiring, proving the economic pathway is genuinely fair?
What specific institutional action is required to build trust and prove that the system is fundamentally changing? We'll leave you with that essential question. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope this analysis gives you a deeper understanding of the stakes and the roadmap for transforming demographic potential into national destiny. We'll see you next time.